So inside of the hands booklet, we had just finished up doing the profile view. So for these hands, this is the extreme version of having her hand pretty much open. And it could be a little bit uncomfortable. So realistically, what we're going to use out of this information is two variations of the profile hand with all the fingers together. So one of them is just with the hand a little more relaxed closed like this. And the second one we're going to do is where the hand is actually closed as if though it's holding a handbag or some sunglasses, or for some reason you want it closed. So get your pamphlet into pages 19 and 20 so we can do the grasping hand. Also take out your profile hands that we just made, and we're going to use these, and also take out a blank new piece of paper. Now, to save on time during the making of these two different hand gestures, what we're going to do is we're going to trace off the profile hand that we've already drawn. And also, since we're going to do two different gestures, what we want to do is we want to have both profile hands on here on the upper part, and then make enough room so you can also trace them off again on the lower part. When you go to trace these off, if your paper is on a dark table like mine is, sometimes as you bring the copy paper over the top, it's hard to see through it. But you'll notice if you put down another piece of white paper for the background, and then you have your drawing on top of that and a clean piece of paper above that, then you'll notice it's easier now to see through the paper. So since I'm going to use a white piece of paper for my background, and I don't want these to be sliding around when I'm tracing off, I can go ahead and tape along the top edge here, and I'll make sure everything is squared up nicely, so then it's not going to move. And then when I bring in my second piece of paper, again, we're going to do two sets of hands, so there will actually be four hands on here. So I want to have the fingertips of these hands close to the top edge of my new piece of paper. And I want to also make sure that my papers are squared up together. And once I have this in place, then I can go ahead and lightly tape these together, knowing that eventually I'm going to peel that tape right back off. So for me, the best thing to have is I want to know where is this center line. So if I put down some dots first, it's nice because then when I put the ruler over, I can just follow those dots. So that was the center of my hand. Then we can come in here and we can find here was the original wrist width, which is 1/4 of a hand. And then if you remember, since we're doing a profile hand, we want the smaller version of that, which we're going to also trace off here at arc A. So for me, I just want that smaller version of the wrist width lightly, and over here. And I also want to get my arc A, arcs B, as well as C. And then we have the lines for the guidelines that are doing the V shape. And so that's good enough for this, for her left hand. And then let's do the same thing here for her right hand. And always remembering that this bottom V shape where her thumb is goes back to the original wrist width. So here's that original wrist, and that's where that V shape is coming back to. Now we have the guidelines in place. I want to get the profile hand, and all we need is the basic profile hand. So it's just the basic profile hand and very, very light. Now that we have this in place, let's go ahead and get one more set below these hands. Now that you have your two pairs of hands ready to go, just double check looking at it and make sure everything looks good and you haven't accidentally drawn a line in the incorrect place. And also make sure the shaping of your thumbs and fingers and stuff still look good. At this stage, I don't want you to have messed something up and made it too thin somewhere. So just double check everything looks good and then we'll move on to the next step. So the first thing we did was we traced off the profile hand as well as keeping our guidelines in here. And then we also kept the smaller wrist width, which comes out here to the middle of the hand at the middle knuckles. So that was step J from doing the profile hand. The next thing we want to do is from the middle of this wrist width, we want to find the middle spot of that, and we want to go through the middle of the fingers. Again, so we want a line that's going to go from the middle of this wrist. So find what you feel like is the middle of the wrist, double check it, and then through the center of the fingers here. And this is going to be A. The next step is where line A goes through the middle of the wrist and the middle of the fingers and where it intersects with arc A, we want to circle that and label this B. Then we want to come in here and where it's intersecting with arc A, right here, we want to circle that and label this B. Also, if you want to, you can darken this in a little bit so you know exactly where that location is. The reason why this location is so important is when you start to close your hand, there's a pivot point right here, and that pivot point always stays there as your hand opens and closes. So that's what B is for. The profile hand that we drew was here at A. I want you to select from B and draw a straight line down here, and we're calling this guideline C. We can come along the fingertip line here and we can find a different position. So come down about halfway between her fingertips and her thumb tips. and we'll label this C, and then we're going to connect with a straight line back to that B pivot point. And then we want to make sure that the fingers are evenly spaced on both sides of guideline C. And you'll notice here that this will go all the way back up to the knuckles at the middle of the hand. And this is coming here to the bottom of that wrist width. And that makes for D. We want this full segment of fingers to now come down and be centered over this guideline C. So we need half of it above and half of it below. So take a look at the distance here, or if you want, you could even kind of measure what it would be to get a sense of it. So let's start this. So this would be the fingertips. This would be the soft curved part of your finger. And they're going to start heading back towards this B pivot point. Now the key thing is when you go back to B, they're not going to be parallel with the guideline. They're going to taper outwards. So it's going to get larger and larger. This fingernail here, you can actually aim back for the center of the knuckle at the top of this guideline here at arch A. So if you want to at first, you can just draw a straight line so you know basically what that's going to look like. And then here we can come in and draw it for real. So you would hit that knuckle, come down, and start to come back into the fingernail itself. Now if it helps you out, what we'll do is we can start to lightly erase the previous set of fingers. But I want you to still know where they used to be, so don't erase them too good. Now again, this is all of your fingers stacking down, and as they aim for B, it should be wider here in the middle of the hand and tapered to narrow at the fingertips. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that this other side is getting wider as we travel back towards B. And now that I'm looking at it, I can see that my knuckle here needs some more volume. So as your hand is bending, this knuckle here is kind of pushing upwards and expanding a little more. So up in this area, what I'll do is I'll make that original knuckle start to bump outwards more and make the fingers a little bit wider there as well. And then this bump here, you don't want it to be too curvy coming back into the wrist. So you come in here and fix some of the wrist as well. So as this bumps up, your hand here is also moving outwards a little bit. The thumb curve will come in here for E, and you're going to notice that it's starting to cut inside of arc A. So take a look at your hand, and as you close it, you'll notice the skin here is starting to crease inwards. So that's what we're doing with D and E. So here's the new wrist width for the profile hand, and we're coming out to the middle of the hand. And this is what you're aiming for this area here for D and E. So let's have the thumb go ahead and curve around, and it's going to start to cut slightly inside of this arc for the first time. And then it'll come up to meet the wrist right there. And then these fingertips here will also buckle inwards and come back to the fingertips. So then if I clean this up, I can get rid of the old hand as well as the fingers as I were starting to draw them. So now this fingertip, the bottom edge of this fingertip is coming in to that wrist width, and then it starts to buckle inside of arc A, and this is D. And then the thumb is curving up and coming back up to here, and that was E. So now that we have the hand that we want, I can go ahead and come back and darken in the rest of the hand that we're keeping. So the thumb basically stayed in its place. So now if you want to show the pointer finger and the middle finger, we'll go ahead and make the pointer finger smaller, and it will be more narrow, and it's coming back here to this pivot point at B. And if you want, you could do a little stair step to show the separation between here is your pointer finger and here's your middle finger. Always remembering that only the middle finger touches all the way out to guideline C. To finish this off, if you wanted to, you could put in a little profile fingernail, and then down here on the thumb as well. So now what I'll do is I'll do this for her left hand, and go ahead and watch me through it, and I'll talk faster and I'll move faster. So step one, we want to find the center of the wrist, and then we're going to go through the middle of all the fingers. Where that intersects here on arc A, we want to make a circle, and this is B. And that's going to be our pivot point. Now we want to drop her hand down so it's a little more relaxed. So I'll bring her finger down here somewhere. And I'm going to make a straight line going back to B, that pivot point. And now I need her fingers to be on both sides of that guideline. So here would be her finger and fingernails. This would be the curved part of her fingers. Now I know that this is going to go all the way back up to her knuckle. So this is the top edge going back up to her knuckles. And at this point I can go ahead and start to erase some of the older fingers. And this knuckle here, I'll go ahead and blend that back to her wrist. Always remembering that that last little bit is a perfect straight line. So even if you scoop her hands a little bit, make sure you're straight for that last little bit there. Now the distance from here to here needs to be repeated from here to here. And that's what you're aiming for. So you're going on either side of the pivot point. Also keeping in mind that the finger is wider here and more narrow there. So for D, basically we're taking this bottom of the finger and we're making it hit this wrist width here, and then you're going to curve, and you're starting to go inside of arc A. You're starting to cut inside of that. So that was D. And then E is the thumb here is going to scoop around and start to cut inside of guideline A and come up, and it will tuck under D. So that was E. E connects back to the thumb. D connects back to your fingertips. Now that everything looks good, we can go ahead and make our thumb darker since there's no change to it. Out here at the fingertips, if we want to turn this into a pointer finger, remember it's going to be a little bit shorter and a little less wide, and the knuckle will be here at B. And then for the middle finger, we can do a little stair step right here to show some separation between the middle finger and the pointer finger. And then for the very end, you can add some profile fingernails, making the middle finger fingernail slightly larger than the pointer. And then you can do a profile fingernail here for the thumb. So now you should have two hands that are more relaxed. They're still open, they're slightly closing. It's just a more relaxed hand. So I'm noticing on her right hand that the wrist is a little bit narrow, so I want to widen that up slightly. And then I'm also noticing here on her left hand that the thumb area looks a little bit wide, so I'm just going to trim some off of that. And that's good enough for now. So the next version is the grasping hand. So this would be a hand if they're holding something. Basically what's happening is we already did the profile hand, which was here at A, and now we're going to do this grasping hand where these fingers come all the way down to F, and so the thumb and fingers can touch. So again, we want the middle of the smaller profile wrist, and we're going to go through the center of the fingers. Where this intersects on arc A, we're going to draw a circle, label it B, and that's our new pivot point. Coming down, we want these fingers here to touch the thumbs. So if I put a line here where they're going to touch, I want to measure how large are those fingers. Then I can measure it down here. And I have a good idea about how wide are the fingers down in this area. The next thing I want to do is I want to split that in half and label this F. And guideline F is lightly going to connect back to B. Some things that you're going to notice are the knuckle will bend here on these fingers, and we need to know the location for that. And where that kink would be is where arc B connects back to arc A. Make sure you make this a very curvy outside curve arc. Where it's touching on F, what we can do is we can move upwards a little bit, and now we can get our knuckles to bend coming back to F here and back to B right there. And then I'm going to erase some of this old F straight line that we don't need anymore. And I'm going to start erasing some of this older profile hand because we don't need it anymore as well. Keeping the thumb. Now let's go ahead and work on the outside edges of her fingers. Again, up here at the knuckles, at the center of the hand, at arc A, this is going to be G and G, where the knuckles will bump upwards and going beyond the guideline. And you can look at where B is, and basically this is going up above that. Now what we're going to do is the fingernails here, are going to start pointing up towards this knuckle bend, and whatever the distance is here, you want to get wider as you're coming out, so wider out to here. Then we can start aiming back for this knuckle. So the middle of the hand knuckle, middle of the finger knuckle. Boom, boom. The next one is the fingers are going to round out. So remember, you're staying on this guideline C, connecting back to B and C, and this is where your fingers will round out, and they're heading back up for this, and then back to the opposite side of B. And whatever the thickness was here, we want to repeat that there. Then you want to step back from it a little bit, take a look at it, see if something is getting too wide. And I feel like my stack of fingers here is just getting a little bit too wide. What I'm going to do is make it more narrow here at the fingertips. As well as for D and E, the webbing on your hand will go even deeper beyond arch A. Once I have all of that ready to go, then I'm going to remember that these fingers are going to cut inside of here, and I need to know where. So it comes down to this new wrist width from the profile hand. I need to take that wrist width and bring it out here. And then that lets me know where this webbing will turn around for D, cutting inside of her hand. And then some flattening out will happen here on G, and a little bit of flattening will happen here on the thumbs. And I'm going to show you that right now. As well, your thumb will start to come in and meet your fingers, so it will straighten out a little bit right here, which would give us a new curve for the thumb pad, and E would cut inside of guideline A. Now, remembering that all of this thickness here is representing all of your fingers. So to trim some stuff out of here, what we can do is erase the guidelines so we don't need anymore. We'll make the pointer finger a little bit shorter, a little more narrow. And don't forget to follow the knuckle bends along here. And then this middle finger won't go the full width here, it will get cut shorter. So go ahead and design a little stair step to show the middle finger here. And the pointer finger slightly lower. And then we can come in and add a fingernail for your pointer finger, a larger fingernail for the middle finger, and a profile fingernail for your thumb. And then let's do the grasping hand coming from the other direction. So here we have two versions of the closing hand and grasping hand. So go ahead and finish these up. After you're done, take a look at them and see if there's anything where you got too wide or too narrow, and you might need to come back and add some flesh back in here, trim away. And keep in mind that the more and more you draw these, you'll be able to do them quicker and a little more elegant and dainty looking as well. When you have your models at this scale and you do a closed hand version, it's actually a pose that you'll use very limited. So like maybe this girl would be holding a handbag or something, but it could also be distracting to your designs. So it's a good one to know just in case you need to use it, but you won't use this one very often. Now that you've completed the two versions of the grasping hand, I want you to scan this and submit it to me as part of your notes from the demo. As well, continuing with the homework from pages 3 and 4, you notice down here we have the grasping hand inside the box, and then this was version 1 right here and version 2 right there. Make sure that your hand's out here. You're following all the steps as well as putting these notes and guidelines into this. And this will be for the left hand view, and then this will be for her right hand view. And this will be